joining this page, you are now a member of Manifest Gang.
We are here. You are not alone. We are one.
Welcome to Starseed Sessions episode 2. Starseed
episode.
Greetings, Galactic Familia, and welcome to our second episode of Starseed Sessions. It is February 19th, 2019, and the auspicious night of the super snow moon. As Mother Luna graces the celestial stage closer to Earth than she will be all year long, we are honored to gather today with you all. Thank you for joining us today in this divine journey. First and foremost, we want to express our deepest gratitude to all of our listeners and those who have turned into episode 1 and shared it with others, helping us spread our love and message as far as we can reach. We appreciate all the love and feedback, and it is an honor to call you family. We have a very special session planned for you today. For those who are just tuning in for the first time, I am Jala, the Great, and I am accompanied by my brothers and sisters,
Cora,
Mystic Grizzly,
Siler,
Slay Cub,
Invader Zlim,
and Michael Brokenfeather.
Yeah.
Fire.
So, in these sessions, we'll be sharing exclusive artistic creations from our collective and also dive into discussion on topics that we hope to provoke and inspire the minds of our listeners. Today, we are going to take a trip down the rabbit hole and talk about cosmic consciousness and quantum physics and the implications of some of the newer discoveries in this blooming field of science that has completely shook the foundations of our understandings of the mechanics of our physical reality. In this episode of Starseed Sessions, we have some unreleased tunes from our brothers Deerskin, Nematodes, Mercury, Crow, and Death Moment. It's gonna be a fun one, y'all. So let's get into it. We're gonna kick this episode off with a remix of Subroot's track called Sacred Activation. This one's by our brother Mercury. Shout out to the Undergrowth Collective.
Starseed Sessions.
Yeah, beautifully crafted, Mercury. We love and appreciate you, brother. Now, we are honored to share this one by one of our greatest inspirations. This one's by Deerskin, and this track is called Witch Doctor.
Starseed Sessions. Starseed Sessions.
Deerskin, that was amazing as always. Keep doing your thing, brother. Alright, y'all, so for this episode of Starseed Sessions, we want to introduce our special guest of the month, Michael Brokenfeather. Tell them a little bit about yourself, Michael.
Hello, thank you guys so much for having me. I'm currently a student studying neuroscience and psychology and working towards bringing an understanding to the basic levels of our existence this will branch into things like biophysics, quantum mechanics, the underlying reasons why our minds act the way they do, and how the universal consciousness within us materializes itself into these human forms.
Yeah. So basically, we're diving down.
Yeah.
We're diving down a rabbit hole here. So prepare yourselves for the journey. We're gonna get into some scientific things. So, what is quantum mechanics or quantum physics?
Well, the underlying structure of the universe, if you don't look at space in terms of distance between things, and you just look at how energy pulls into forming us, underneath this physicality that we're so used to with our bodies, beneath the cells, beneath the neurons within your brain, there's energy feeding through to create those structures, and that's where things like quantum physics and quantum mechanics needs to begin to get looked at, because it's really the study of how this energy, this pure energy, begins to materialize itself into forms that then create us.
Yeah. What he said. All right, so one of the things that quantum mechanics suggests is that objects can act across time and space with no apparent connection. Now, for centuries, the field of science has built upon the materialist conclusion that consciousness is a random product of the mind and can be explained by natural processes and by chemistry of the brain. That our existence is determined and completely created by our DNA and brain biology. Essentially, we're just biological robots, right? Now, now, breakthrough discoveries in the field of quantum mechanics and other fields of scientists imply that this is not the case. Instead, the natural universe is emergent from consciousness, and at a fundamental level, we can call this personal source God. New studies have shown that the mind is actively able to change the chemical makeup of the brain. Science cannot explain the will and its effect in shaping and molding our reality. Thus, we are not slaves to genetics and brain chemistry. Now, Michael, what are your thoughts on this, real quick?
Well, in terms of mind and brain, again, it goes back to this universal energy that really does reside within everything, and it could be kind of looked at as though on the basic building blocks that create us from that energy are then what the brain turns into. It's like the brain is the computer in which the universe is using to calculate some sort of grand equation. It's trying to calculate a super task, which is an infinite number of calculations within a specified time. And so right now that's going on. We don't know how much time it's going to take, but the universe is indeed using these human forms as we continue to evolve as the computer in order to figure itself out. So it creates it's this giant loop between energy materializing into greater and greater forms through this process of evolution in order to figure out as much of itself. And in the process, we get these wonderful things like the ability to experience emotion, and it's really, really special to be able to perceive that in the way that humans do, and whatever we evolve from here.
What a time to be alive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, seriously, we are at such a pivotal moment in our evolution as the human species. You know, we now have access to the internet, and we become even more connected than ever before, right? So we have the ability not only to share information, but to connect with others in a way that we never did before. Now, one of the things that I am extremely interested in quantum mechanics is a concept called quantum entanglement. So, quantum entanglement is a proven principle of quantum mechanics that observes that at a subatomic level, Entangled subatomic particles are capable of communicating instantaneously across space and time. This fact violates Einstein's own theory of relativity, specifically that the transmission of information cannot travel faster than the speed of light. So Einstein called it spooky action at a distance.
That's a chart.
Action.
So perhaps the most famous example of quantum entanglement says that particles on opposite sides of the universe can be intrinsically linked so that they share information instantly. And this is the idea that made Einstein scoff. In a simplified expression, an entangled system is defined as one in which the quantum state of its components cannot be factored as a product of its local environment, because the individual particles are part of an inseparable whole, no matter how great the separation. In entanglement, one component of the entangled system cannot be fully described without considering the others in its system, because they are so interrelated and share information simultaneously. The state of the entangled system is expressed as the sum, or the superposition of all its components. Now that can be difficult to grasp, but it's this law of quantum mechanics that applies at all scales. So if this is true for the microcosm, then it is also true for the macrocosm. This quantum process can be applied to larger systems, such as biology, which leads us to a whole nother field of study called quantum biology.
Yeah, in terms of quantum biology, that would be this resonating materialization to create the brain. And to go back to your point in terms of how Einstein was perceiving it with spooky action at a distance, the thing that quantum mechanics begins to show us is that there may not be any distance, and there may not be these different dimensions which are separating things, spatially speaking. And it begins to kind of look at the fact that this could be one single dimensional frequency that we are all a part of. So it's when you think of it being at a distance, instead of looking at it as that, think of it as being part of the same whole. And then things like quantum entanglement begin to make sense, because you realize that it's the same thing, but you have this observer in the middle. You have this consciousness that we are, and we're observing ourselves. So it looks as though there's distance between us in space, but it's still the same life force that feeds through all of us, And so when you begin to think of it like that, in terms of it just being one aliveness that each one of us is able to kind of tap back into at a very fundamental, basic level, you can really see that there is no distance between anything. It's all part of some single whole. And quantum mechanics and quantum biology are going to be able to, once we get better at it, show that.
That like everything comes from like the same source.
The same singularity, exactly.
It's like a giant big picture masterpiece that you just zoom in and out of, like you zoom the farthest amount in and it's just a brush stroke, and you zoom out and
One
you realize it's
fractal.
a giant picture.
Absolutely. And the thing about the universal consciousness is that we each have a singularity within us which is feeding back into the whole, and each one of us is indeed just a different iteration in this computing mind that we live within. And so sometimes the equation wants to recreate a different iteration of itself. And so that's done through how humans involve it as love. So when you are created, by your two parents, these are two-dimensional, separate but linked dimensional waves that converge and create a new singularity, which again feeds back to that moment of creation. And so you are conceived, and you are then a new part of that whole wave. So that's how we come to be here.
And that ties into the unified field theory thing as well.
Absolutely.
Now, one of the most beautiful things that I ever heard, right, is that you are the creation of infinite generations of love. And it is true, man. down to our DNA, the reason we are here today is because that connection was shared between so many of our ancestors. Now, as I said, that when I first heard that kind of shook me in such a beautiful way, because we are the product of love. You know what I mean? So I really love that, and I love to share that one too.
It's a great convergence, love. It's the tying energy that we all are brought together because of.
And I've also heard, like, I'm reading this book, Seth Speaks, and he speaks of the consciousness creating you in the physical reality as a form of creative expression. That's the way the conscious expresses itself creatively. It creates
Absolutely.
a physical being, and it sees what possibilities can come
Absolutely.
from that.
There's a full spectrum of emotion, but once you have the awareness of what you are, of course, you want to be on that love side of the spectrum. You want to be on that happiness side of it, because it's really just like, wow, I'm so connected to everything else. There's no separation, there's no division, and so when you have the awareness that brings you to those places, that's that tying force. That's that love force. So.
Love force.
Love force.
All right, y'all. We got a deep one by the homie Death Moment. This one is called Tranquil Eyes.
Starseed Sessions.
Big ups, Death Moment. That was amazing. Keep on doing the damn thing. All right. And this one's by one of our Manifest Gang's own, Crow. This one's called Feet Skipping.
Starseed Sessions. Starseed Sessions. The big homie Crow killing it as always. Mad love, mad respect. All right. So, getting back into discussion, right? We talked about quantum mechanics, quantum physics. Now, I wanted to touch on cosmic consciousness. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the term, right? Cosmic consciousness has been defined as a higher form of consciousness than that possessed by the ordinary man. This type of awareness may be associated with an experience of knowing God, or of transcending the five senses and finding a hidden consciousness or reality in which is beyond the perceivable world. For many, the journey to experiencing cosmic consciousness involves practices such as yoga, meditation, prayer, and acts of faith. It is said that in a state of cosmic consciousness, the human mind is elevated beyond the awareness of the self and the ego, and enters a place of oneness and unity with the universe. It is finding this unity that is the one goal of yoga. Now, it has been postulated that the concept of cosmic consciousness may be related to the hidden dimensions of quantum mechanics.
Well, I definitely think that based on studies that have already been done with things like brainwaves, which is very much what I want to study, transcendental meditation with Tibetan Buddhist monks has been looked at, and they reach states of very, very high brain activity, which is part of this gamma wave vibration that they end up falling into, which is brain waves that operate at hertz levels quicker than what the neurons are supposed to be able to fire at within inside of our brains. So there's a bit of a quandary there, and I think what they're tapping into in these moments of transcendence is that cosmic consciousness. So there is definitely an ascending level which we as humans are going to be tasked with trying to find, each for ourselves and then as a species. That's what I think of cosmic consciousness.
Getting as close to the communal vibration of the universe that you possibly can.
Yeah.
I love that word, that communal vibration.
Communal vibration.
Yeah,
That's
we
what it's
vibe
all about.
together.
Yeah.
I had something I wanted to say about quantum physics. I'm reading a book called The Jazz of Physics. I'm not very far into the book, but it links music and the structure of the universe. That's like its main focus. And in the introduction, it mentions that like both jazz and quantum physics use improvisation as like its method of like covering ground. So like jazz is very like improvisational based, and that's how you like, you know, further that genre of music. And it kind of has to be applied to making new discoveries in quantum physics. Like you get the grasp of the fundamentals of what you're doing, and then you kind of have to like make leaps and then check your work, sort of thing. I thought that was really interesting, and I'll probably be talking about this book as I go further along into it and as these episodes continue. But I don't know. I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, that's a
awesome
cool concept.
I do like that.
But yeah.
I'm sorry, guys.
I got found this anecdote here, so give me just a moment.
We can go.
Now, to touch back onto that, right? So I actually looked at that study that you're talking about, and what they did was they took brain scatters and they scanned lifelong meditators who have meditated over 62,000 lifelong hours, right? Now, the brain waves of these meditators showed significant levels of gamma wave, which is the strongest wave in our EEG spectrum. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, I believe they're using EEG, which is electroencephalography, to measure the brain waves that they were seeing.
Yeah. So the gamma wave is like the type of wave that would be experienced when we bite into an apple, right? It's like a sensory, pleasurable experience in like all dimensions: smell, taste, sound, and the feel of like crunching into that apple. Now, the study shows that these meditators have this gamma at an all-time as a lasting effect. This is their everyday state of mind. When asked to do a meditation on compassion, these gamma waves jumped 700 to 800% in a few seconds. Now, this is a special state of consciousness. Some call it enlightenment or liberation. But in truth, we lack a vocabulary to capture how this state can be. Okay. So we got the homies nematodes, otherwise known individually as Paradise and GG Wallin, with this track titled Frosted. Let's get icy, y'all. up in here, man. Yeah, that was a good one. I appreciate you guys so much. Nematodes, thank you guys for being part of this. Thank you to all of the artists that contributed to this podcast. We truly appreciate you all. Thanks for showing love. Thanks for your support. And thanks for providing us some fresh content to share with the world. Mad love, mad respect. All right, so we wanted to leave this episode to some of our, homies out there in the scene, in this beautiful community that we all love and enjoy. But we also wanted to put some of our flavor in here. So the ambient music you hear in the background is done by us, Manifest Gang. That is Siler, Slay Cub, and Invader's Limb. So hope you enjoyed that little touch. We had to do it for you guys, but keep on the lookout for our stuff too.
So it's really interesting because the brain is simultaneously figuring out itself as well as this external environment, and it's almost as though that could be utilized as an analogy for what humanity can eventually do, which is the melding of science and spirit, because as the brain and as the mind is figuring out its external environment, that could be a representation of like what I'm studying now in terms of a scientific method behind everything. And it's also calculating and further looking within, which is much more what we could relate to a spiritual experience. And humanity as a whole can benefit when we really start to merge these topics of spirit and science together and form them into one universal language, which is how we can get to these cosmic conscious states.
Right,
it's really cool.
The unified field theory, the merging of science, physics, and spirituality into one thing, because it is all the same thing. Like all the sacred texts of religion are just describing this space-time fabric, and they're describing everything that's going on around us. So in turn, they are the same thing and should not be separate.
Right. Science could be looked at as the language in which we can begin to communicate spiritual experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like Jamie Hanover said, instead of using words and poems to describe what we're seeing, numbers are extremely accurate. So science applied to these things is just an accurate representation of what's going on.
Yep.
And it's kind of like remedial to not like grasp that like these are all one and the same. We are all of this same universal substance. And so we're just trying to explain like individual parts of it, but they're not entirely separate. Like we're all from this one substance. Energy. It is all the same thing.
The space, the pool of energies and vibrations that create everything.
All right, so just to tie in these the two concepts of cosmic consciousness and quantum mechanics, right? So if the argument for cosmic consciousness holds, then we must accept that all consciousness emerges from this source. From here we can presume that all individuals are parts of a whole, or a collective consciousness. Beings are connected intrinsically and deeply across all space and time. This idea and the concept of this cosmic consciousness is a reality, and humanity has been guided by something greater that is divine in nature and has a greater plan, or is interacting with humanity and influencing us over time. In the case of the Starseed, we as beings incarnating on Earth from higher realms to assist in a divine agenda, there is a master plan at work, and these entangled agents in this master plan do not work independently, but instead work and act together, across space and time simultaneously, without being physically conscious of the roles or even existence of these other entangled agents. Teamwork making the dream work. All right, family. So we're gonna wrap this episode up, but before we do, we want to thank you all for tuning in on this divine journey. Stay tuned for the next one, and as always, feel free to please include yourselves in this conversation. Communicate with us anything you want to be shared, any art you have to share with us that we can share with the world. We are here together. Let us manifest our greatest reality. Blessings forever.
We are here. You are not alone. We are one.
Star Sessions episode.